this is something that helps me get better mixes all the time. What I do is what I call the step method. Now, it's just a ridiculous name, but the point is, in Pro Tools, if you're using your mouse to mix and you're moving a volume line, if you click it up one, like is the smallest amount you can get it up without changing settings inside the DAW and all sorts of stuff, just using the mouse, is 0.8. It's less than 1 decibel. 0.8 dB of a change is the smallest change you can make with a mouse, up and down, if you're dealing with like on the edit window. I'll show you what I'm talking about. So check this out. If you have something like this, okay, look, so you see these as kick in, kick out, right? These are the volume lines. Now, this is probably the same in any DAW. It just might not be this exactly done the same, but check this out. If I move this down, look, negative 0.8 dB, okay? Now, if I move it up, plus 0.8 dB. That's the smallest change you can make using your mouse. So I started mixing using a mouse. I didn't have a control surface. I didn't have a console. I started on a mouse. So when I learned this way, what I basically realized is that's the smallest increase that matters to me. Now, this is what I mean. Ready? Big scopes is what you're doing when you're trying to make stuff sound good in a mix. You're making major fader moves. In other words, the bass is way too low. Now, you move it up so you can hear it. It might be too loud, so you back it down. Now, once you get it close, then it becomes a game of, do you need to make it a little lower? Because what I consider a little lower is actually twice the smallest increase you can do. So in other words, 1.6, right? It's just 8 times 2. So 0.8 dB twice becomes 1.6 dB of a change. Now that's almost 1.5, that's a little over 1.5 dB, right? But what that basically means is that's a difference that I consider to be a difference, like a little bit of a difference, right? But the other thing is when is it right or is it wrong? If I'm like, does it need to come up or is it the right volume? If you question that, then the answer is usually only 0.8 dB in either direction. If it's a little too loud or you're unsure, then just move it that little tiny bit, that 0.8. Whereas if you're like, yeah, it's definitely a little low, and then you want to check it a little louder, you do 1.6 of a dB change. Trust me when I tell you, as soon as you start thinking in these broad scopes like that, instead of, is it 0.1? Is it 0.2? Is it 0.3? Is it 0.4? As soon as you stop thinking that way, you actually make moves that matter. You get to the end quicker because this is how you get a mix into a position that it's great. It's never about the 0.4 dB, 0.2, 0.3. It's never about that. So stop going there. You should be making these big moves to get it right. And the way you do that is with the volume knob on your monitor controller, all right? You know, you make it, or in your case, if you're just in the DAW, you're all in the box, use the master fader. You're turning it up or down to make sure your levels and volumes are right, because it's got to be checked at a low volume. It's got to be checked at somewhere in the middle, and it's got to be checked loud. And that's how you tell if the volumes are right. You can't possibly get it right with it loud, because then all of a sudden you hear everything. And if it's way too low, you could be fooling yourself into thinking you have the mix sounding great when you don't. So it's all about checking all over the place, checking low, medium, and loud. I really think in 3 terms for volume, and I don't really think in the middle. I have my controller set up where I know exactly where I'm going for loud, I know exactly where the middle is, and I know where low is because I have a dim thing. I just hit the dim and it gets lower. But you guys just set this up too, where you just maintain your master fader and you just keep moving that into those 3 positions, because that will allow you, once it's low, things will stick out that are too loud. Like if a vocal's too loud, it'll stick out. If harmonies are too, you'll notice it'll stick out. So that's what the benefit of low is. Whereas loud is a great thing to be able to hear what's hurting your ears. Like if there's some frequencies you can't hear when it's low, that's the purpose of making it loud, so that all of a sudden now you hear it and that's hurting or that's upsetting, and you lower this, you lower that. Things will bother you way more when it's loud. So you got to use the loud. And then middle is just in the middle is this right there too. Okay. So you got to check at all the volumes and you got to make big moves. But this is the other key, right? I'm giving you all the keys. As soon as you take your big moves on all the things that matter, okay? So like, and I'm making big moves on buses, by the way, because my tracks generally stay at 0. So in other words, all my tracks, let's say vocals, right? I'm clip gaining and making sure the gain is not too loud on the track itself, but that's through clip gain most of the time. That's what people call it, gain staging or whatever. Don't call it whatever you want. Point is, on the track itself, that's where I'm dealing with making sure it's not too loud, so it's not clipping there. Gain staging is just really understanding the signal flow. That's really all it means. So you don't have to even call it that. If you just understand the signal flow, that's why Andrew Sheps is like, I don't gain stage, because he understands the signal flow. So he doesn't have a need to. Where it's too loud, he brings it down. And he understands where you would need to do that in order to make it not affect something else. So for example, this is why I keep my tracks on 0. Ready? If by keeping the tracks on 0, what that essentially means, let me just show you in this session too. Ready? So you see this kick right here. So if you get a kick, you get kick in, kick out, and they're both feeding this thing, kick, snare, bus, right? Let's say there's also a snare that's all coming here. So these plugins wouldn't be on because, or maybe they would, but let's just say they're not, because these are not for kick ins and kick outs. But, you know, just for another tutorial I was doing. Now check this out. Kick in, kick out are feeding this bus. So let's say you put some sort of compressor on this bus. Any compressor will do. So let's just put, it doesn't even matter. My favorite 2254. All right, here we go. Let's say you do this. Now, the goal here is if we send too much signal from the tracks into this, it's going to sound different than if we lower the tracks here and now a lot less signal is hitting this. The compressor will not work the same if you change your track volume. So as a result of this, you must leave this the same wherever you start. In other words, you leave it at 0 so that you can set this once and it will work the way you want it to work. And then if you want to make everything lower, you make it lower from the bus level. Like over here, you make the bus lower, not the track, because that way you'll maintain the same sound hitting the compressor. It will just be a lower version of it. Now, a lot of people have talked about this, but it's so critical. The understanding signal flow is the reason your mix will be good or not, because you have to know where you can lower things. In other words, that's why I leave these on 0 for most of my tracks, because I like to process on buses in groups of stuff. And by doing that, if you move this, you're constantly chasing your tail. So in other words, as long as the track, the kick in, kick out, is not clipping at the track level, and I would adjust that on the clip gain, then I don't have to mess with the volume. The volume can stay at 0. See, that's the point. Like, and there's not like a magic to this. Like, for example, if you have a whole drum set, in that case, you may have to get the balance right on the drum set where some cymbals are lower than the kick and it's lower than the snare and the toms are a different volume. So I'm not saying it has to be at 0. I'm just saying when you get that balance right, you leave it alone, and then you mess with the processing on the bus level to get that to sound the way you want. And then once you get that right, you don't need to mess with the balance anymore of the drum set. Within the drums, those faders stay where they are. So now you can just deal with processing on the bus level. You deal with, do you want more or less? And you raise the volume of all the drums or not with the buses. The balance of the drums will stay the same if you do this. I think this is so important for people to understand, that the balance stays the same when you mess with the buses and not with the tracks themselves. Okay, so once you get this under control, all right, then you could do the last step. The last step is after you get the big moves done, then you move down to where is it a little difference? That would be 1.6. That's if you need to make it a little louder. 1.6 up, right? It's just 0.8 times 2. Or is it just like, I'm not sure if it needs to come up, but I like kind of, maybe it does. If you're worried, if you're guessing at all, then it becomes just a 0.8 dB increase or decrease. And you'll know, because that's enough of a change where it's noticeable, but it's noticeable for people who are really listening. It's not like broad. It's not going to make a huge difference. It's not going to ruin your mix, but it will make it that little bit better, that little tiny bit better. And that's the thing, is that's your fine tune process. Once you get that done, then you move to automation. Because once it's fine tuned, where at all different volumes it sounds good, now you just work on the words you can't hear. So that everything I just did was broomstick level. In other words, you notice how I can move this whole fader at once, and you can do it here too at the volume level. So like it's like it doesn't matter where you do it. In other words, you could do it here, you could do it here, you know, like on these tracks, because you haven't automated yet. As soon as you automate, like the moment you automate, check this out. Now you won't be able to move this anymore, because as soon as I do move it, you see this green arrow? There's a green arrow that pops up under the track. If I were to hit play, this thing jumps back to where it was. That's the pain about automating first. You cannot automate first. You must automate at the end. After you get everything in a great position, you can automate. That's how it works. Because until then, it becomes too much of a pain to do. So like everything's not going to work the way you want, and then you wind up automating and re-automating and re-automating. So the way I recommend it is do the broomstick thing. That's like an Al Schmidt style mix, where your balance is so good that it will exist when everything is just at the right volume with a broomstick all the way across. Then what you do is go in and worry about the little things. The little things that now, okay, I lose a word or two here, so you automate that word, you know, okay, this word should come up here. This thing is a little loud, we'll bring that down here. But check this out also. This is what I want you to do. I want you to think in terms of these 1.6s. In other words, if it's like, I want to make a change that's noticeable, just 1.6. And then if you need more than that, then you do another 1.6 or the other direction. You see what I'm saying? You 1.6, 1.6, 1.6. Until it works. And when you get where it's like, ooh, now it might be perfect, I'm not sure. As soon as you're unsure, then it might only be a 0.8 dB change. This is so big, I can't explain how big this is, because it will get you out of the weeds thinking about 0.2, is it 0.3? I never ever think that way, ever. There's just no reason to think that way, because you have bigger fish to fry. And your fish to fry, you know, are getting your mix into shape. And if the mix gets into shape, making perceptible differences, and perceptible difference is 1 dB is a perceptible difference to most people. So that 0.8 is just under a perceptible difference. And believe me when I tell you, that's enough to take something you're unsure of and make you sure of it. Be like, ooh, is it a little low or not? I don't know. And then you're like, oh, it's perfect now. That 0.8, that's all you need. And the other, if it's a little loud, I'm not sure, 0.8 down. 0.8 down is all you need. See what I'm saying? So that's literally, start thinking in this ballpark. Trust me, it'll help you so much. And you can get to the point where your mix sounds way better. I guarantee it. Do me a favor. If this helped you out, throw it in the comments, because I never saw another video like this. And I was like, why not? I do this all the time. It just occurred to me today. I was like, I've never seen anybody talk about this. So throw something in the comments. It helps a lot. Let me know anything you guys dig about doing something like this or not, especially if you guys have other methods. I'd love to hear it. I have no idea how this works on other DAWs in terms of what the minimum line is, but it should tell you how much of a dB or you're increasing, and how, you know, how so do it in 0.8. Trust me, it doesn't matter what DAW you're using, this will work. But let me know how it works on other DAWs, if you guys use Reaper or FL or whatever. I'm curious how that works in terms of the smallest increase you can do on a mouse. Is it the same, or can you set it to whatever? Because if you can, set it to this. Set it to that 0.8 and you'll see what happens, all right? I hope you dug the video. Hit the like button if you liked it. Subscribe if you haven't already. My name's Evan Jaffe, Custom Cut Studios. You guys got this.